Hello, everyone. This is the Tech Surge Deep Tech Podcast presented by Celesta Capital. Each episode, we spotlight issues and voices at the intersection of emerging technologies, company building, and venture investments. My name is Sriram Viswanathan, founding managing partner at Celesta Capital. This is the latest episode in our Industries at Intersection series, looking at customer service and call center industry, one of the places where AI is expected to have a major impact. We are joined here at this episode by the founders of a pretty interesting company called Crescendo AI. Crescendo provides businesses with outsourced management of their customer service and contact center operations, using AI to augment the human expertise and deliver a much higher level of service to its customers. There is a lot of hype and questions around AI right now. And as you guys know, and our audience will appreciate, the customer experience in general is a sector that is expected to be significantly impacted. And it's expected to actually be implementing large-scale AI applications and use cases. And it's presumably one of the first large industries that might get disrupted by this technology. And as our audience may know, Celesta invests quite heavily in deep tech, especially in the areas around industry transformation. So that is the context of Crescendo. We are an investor in Crescendo along with General Catalyst. There's a lot of stuff to dig into this session. To help us through this topic, we're joined here by Crescendo AI's two co-founders, Andy Lee and Anand Chandrasekaran. Andy is the founder and executive chairman of Alorica, one of the business process outsourcing companies in the world. Alorica has more than 100,000 employees globally and manages more than 2 billion customer interactions each year for all of its customers. Anand is a very seasoned product leader and investor, a long history of investing and building large platforms. He most recently served as a partner at General Catalyst, one of the storied large-scale venture capital firm in the Valley, where he actually incubated this along with his other partners at General Catalyst to launch Crescendo. He's been recognized as one of the top seed investors in India for the past 3 years. So congratulations, Anand. And earlier in his career, Anand was actually a product exec at Meta, Five9, Bharti, Yahoo, and a bunch of other technology companies. Andy and Anand, a great pleasure to have you both on this podcast. Thank you for joining me in this conversation.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. Let's start by looking at the contact center industry. I think our audience probably knows quite a bit about the whole BPO space. And everybody, of course, knows about what is really driving the growth of the BPO call center industry over the last couple of decades. And largely it's driven by cheap labor and cheap manpower, which presumably has resulted in sometimes inconsistent quality, sometimes linguistic issues with some of the customers. And this is an industry that is almost $500 billion in revenue. And so this is a great sector which could get impacted by generative AI. And there are lots of people going after this. Half the customer service executives expect AI to have the most impact in their businesses within the next year, according to Gartner. So to kick us off, Andy, why don't you give us a grounding on the dynamics of this sector? Since you've been an entrepreneur catering to this industry, albeit not with AI, but with the traditional models. So can you just sort of give us some basic foundation on the market pressures and what are some of the preconditions that make this particular industry ripe for AI adoption?
Great question. I think that's actually a fundamental issue that I observed 25 years ago when I started Alorica, was that I felt that the business construct, meaning the relationship between CX, the customer experience provider, and the business was not totally aligned, because historically and even up to today, the entire business is based on units of labor hours. And when you think about what businesses want to buy, what they want to buy is an outcome for their customer but they want to do it in a way that is most effective and efficient. And traditionally, businesses have been challenged to manage and balance the issue of wanting to provide the best customer experience for their customers with the challenge of the cost of doing so. And so historically, what businesses have done is they've tried to manage that cost by implementing deflection strategies, right? And deflection strategies could be things like self-help or an automated voice response system, like the IVR, the integrated voice response system, where a machine is trying to triage what you're actually calling about before they route you to a human, or they'll slow down how quickly they pick up the phone, all to kind of manage to a budget. And I think the outcome of that is consumers not being able to interact with businesses how and when they want, and businesses not being able to hear 100% of customer issues and opportunities. At the same time, because the pricing is based on labor hours and clients have, cost pressures, ultimately this service has gotten commoditized. The customer experience labor component has gotten commoditized over time. And that compressed providers' economics as well. And so when you think about that ecosystem, there's not a lot of excess dollars or even incentives on either side to really think about how to improve the customer experience while reducing overall costs. And so I observed that 25 years ago, and it's something that I've wanted to change, but to change an industry, it's not easy to change how people buy, how they view a service. And there hasn't been what I would call spark technology that's enabled that transition and that transformation of how business is done. So like my excitement of building this new augmented AI business is that I think we're going to be able to finally solve that industry issue, which is historically, the industry has been trying to find a balance between cost and really serving customers. And Gen AI, to me, is the enabling technology that's going to help us break through that.
Yeah, so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But before we do that, just putting a fine point on Alorica itself. Alorica is a traditional call center BPO kind of company. Can you just give us some financial metrics and size of what Alorica is catering to today?
Sure. Alorica today serves almost every vertical. So anything from retail, e-commerce to financial services, healthcare, consumer products. There's not a single segment of the industry that Alorica doesn't touch today. It serves typically the largest and most reputable companies in each vertical. It's around a $2 billion revenue business today. It operates around the world, primarily focused on serving North American end users, but delivering that customer experience service from around the world. So countries like the Philippines or India or Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Colombia. So we have an incredible delivery infrastructure, but it's all with people, right? What we've been able to do is help our clients manage their customer interactions, whether it's customer service, sales, collections, whatever the interaction may be. Alorica can handle those interactions and provides the labor to do so.
So in a way, you're probably looking at AI as both a threat and opportunity for Alorica, because presumably AI could completely disrupt your business. If you don't address it, somebody else could just create what you're talking about with hundreds of thousands of people instead of doing that using a super smart AI agent, correct?
100%. I think if you were to talk to industry leaders across the board, I think there's a lot of fear around what AI and generative AI specifically will do to the industry. From a personal perspective, I think it's a great opportunity, because I actually think that because of generative AI, we're going to see companies engage in significantly more interactions with their customers. I think the aperture at the top of the funnel in terms of quantum of conversations and types of conversations are going to expand. In my opinion, I think it's going to expand by 10x. And because of that, we also see that AI can handle approximately somewhere between 60 to 90% of transactions, depending on type of transactions. If you start to think about that kind of dynamic, if the overall pool increases by 10 times and AI is handling, let's say, 7x of that, there's still 3 times more human interactions that are going to be that are going to need to be handled. And our belief is that those interactions are going to be significantly more complex than they are today, which means that there's going to be an upscaling of labor as well as an expansion of labor.
Yeah, and we'll get into this in terms of quality and how reliable the AI agent is with respect to the responses and customer satisfaction, and whether that's equal to a human in the loop kind of an experience. So to sort of expand on that, Anand, I want to turn to you. General Catalyst, you joined there more as an investor, and in your personal capacity, you've been sort of funding and seed investing in a number of companies. What was the reason why you saw this? Tell us the backstory of how you and Andy got hooked up to create Crescendo.
Yeah, thanks, Sriram. I think that largely it was this realization that contact centers are a natural area where automation can really make a huge difference. So my last job before joining General Catalyst was at Five9, where I was leading product and saw sort of the previous generation of software in the space. The thing that strikes you is customers would buy a lot of software from us. And the more software they bought and the more complicated the integrations became, the more their CX actually sucked, right? Which is ironic because they're making all these investments to actually improve their CX, right? And what we saw was that in addition to everything else, just the rollout process and the pre-integration and everything not being available as a service that delivers an outcome was sort of at the heart of why they were never able to get great CX, right? So when I was starting to explore how Gen AI can impact our industry, we started to look at what is the biggest problem that we should solve, which is a 25-year-old problem that Andy talked about, which is the unit of value is labor. The unit of value is not automation. And the software that helps, to deliver an outcome instead of just delivering labor, it's just a bad surrogate for an outcome. And so we have this moment where the level of automation that we can provide is so high, but also the level of outcome that can be delivered, both the accountability as well as the monitoring, as well as the alignment between the enterprise and the service provider is finally possible for the first time in 20-25 years. So when Andy and I first met, we were connected by one of the founders of Observe.ai, where I was an early investor and Andy was working with them super closely to deploy their technology. I reacted to three things. One was Andy was just like an incredible first principles thinker, which when, the companies become really big, the founders become more of CEOs and they lose a lot of the entrepreneurial first principles thinking. But despite having built Alorica to a top 5 BPO, Andy was just like starting from first principles and being curious about what Gen AI could do for our industry. Secondly, Andy had really been one of the few people in our industry from really any background who had scaled a company through the stages, right? Early stage, sort of hundreds of millions, now billions of dollars, and had taken the customers through all of those journeys and managed to retain most, if not all of them. And so we knew that we could build a very enduring business together with that actually business scaling experience. And then the last thing I would say, which has been super helpful to us, is the inorganic and kind of non-dilutive ability to grow through whether it's buy and transform or just thinking about the capital architecture, right? And there are lots of founders who, when they build these businesses, don't think about the capital architecture that's needed to build and scale the business. And Andy had done that very intuitively through his entire Alorica journey. So when we met, it was just like a great fit for us to, start from a technology perspective, start from a BPO business perspective. And then we really built a multidisciplinary team around the two of us.
Yeah. So this is great. I want to double click on a couple of things that you said here, which is, the BPO industry historically is notorious for lack of innovation. As you said, the unit of value is the labor, or unit of constraint is labor. You can't scale the business because labor is constrained. If every day the BPO's company's value walks out the door in the evening, and you have no guarantee they're going to show up the next day. So with that as the core business that Andy you've built, it's conceivable that AI could completely replace your core value that you've built in Alorica. I mean, do you worry about that, or how does that impact? Because Crescendo and Alorica have no connection today. These are two completely separate companies. One could, it's kind of like the one could eat the other. So how do you think about that?
So I think one of the things that I talked about a bit earlier is that I think generally fear is one of the most powerful emotions that drive people's decisioning and actions. And I think when something like this happens, a lot of times people get paralyzed with the fear of what if, what's going to happen, and how is this going to change? If you're on point, if you're running a big business, you're generally in a protectionist mode. You're in the mode of like, how do I protect this business and create sustainability going forward? And I think a lot of folks in our industry today are faced with that question. I think when you're faced with that question, a better way to do it is to lean in and really think about what's the world going to look like in 5 years because of this technology? How are things going to be different? And how are consumers, what things will consumers be willing to embrace, and how will they change their behaviors? And I think the smart businesses will observe those consumer changes in behavior and think about how to leverage technology like Gen AI to meet customers where they want to be met and help them solve and resolve and buy in the way that they want to and when they want to, right? So to me, this is an opportunity, again, like Anand mentioned, this is an opportunity to completely rethink how businesses connect with customers. And that's beyond exciting, because nothing really transformative has happened in like the last 25, 30 years. So this is to me, this is an opportunity. Is it scary? Yeah, it can be scary, but I think the opportunities far outweigh the negatives.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into some of the technical details. Anand, you in your prior life, you helped scale Meta's Facebook's Messenger platform to over 1 billion users. What exactly is the technical architecture of Crescendo? Because I understand the old traditional business of BPOs like Alorica, and then of course Crescendo is infusing a whole bunch of technology. But is it building large language models per vertical and then incorporating that into the core workflow? We could just talk about the technical aspects of it.
Yeah. So I think what we attempted to do, it's going to become a bit more mainstream in terms of how companies get built in AI, in our view, Sriram, which is, I think we need to have multidisciplinary teams that cover off all the key elements that we need to be excellent at. In our case, it is a combination of AI, BPO, and contact center. And why is that the case? So we have Slava, who was CTO of Genesis. We have Matt, who is one of the SVPs and leading sort of architects of Zendesk as they scale. And then Todd Famous from Genesis, Andy, myself, and many others. The reason I think we need that multidisciplinary team is because we're going to have to build an architecture that actually delivers the entire outcome. So whether it is something we can fully automate, partially automate, or we shouldn't automate at all, we're responsible to deliver the outcome, and we get paid for the outcome that we deliver. So while we don't build the underlying LLMs, we've built a lot of layers around it to ensure that that outcome gets delivered, right? To give you an example of that, why has this not happened over the last 5 years? We've thought really long and hard about the reasons why this has not become mainstream. And one of the biggest reasons is accuracy. Another big reason is brand exposure. And with AI, you have hallucinations. So that's where we focus a lot of our tech and our architecture, is not to reinvent the wheel and what's already been done, but to really ensure we take care of the reasons why this has never gotten into the mainstream. And those are reasons like the ones that we just talked about. And so one thing that we do is we guarantee that the brand will not be exposed, and we focus the questions and answers on customer care, for example. So that's a key piece of technology that we've built.
Now, if I may interrupt you, is that based on a set of language models for, let's say, for healthcare or financial services or IT support? how are you building the knowledge base for that question, and how are you continuously improving the knowledge base?
Yeah, so we, by owning every interaction, we're able to learn from literally what happens in every interaction in terms of, are we automating it right? We track the sentiment of that interaction and say, was the customer happy when we automated this transaction? Is it better than if a human had done it, and so on? And by owning the entire interaction, sometimes we may actually start by doing it manually, but within a few weeks, we know how to automate it, and then we can sort of automate it and deliver it at a better margin profile. What we are loyal to is sort of the top line and the growth profile of a BPO, because we're going after the labor budget, which is for every $1 spent on software in contact centers, about $10 to $12 are spent on labor. So we're going after the labor budget. But in order to go after the labor budget, we should be confident of delivering the outcome one way or the other, right? So we mostly automate, as Andy mentioned, 50 to 70% through AI, but we do have the humans in the loop for the other 30%, which makes us incredibly confident of delivering the outcome.
So are you built on some of the established models, Llama or GPT, or what is the core architecture built on?
Yeah, so we leverage all of the top LLMs. In fact, embarrassingly, I wrote in my original memo that we have to build our own LLM, not being aware of how fast the LLMs would evolve. And we've really been able to kind of ride the shoulders of giants, so to say, and take advantage of all the capabilities that have happened, including on voice. So originally, I thought that a lot of the LLM innovation was on the data side, but on the voice, we'd have to recreate our own. But it's been incredible how much of it we've been able to kind of piece together, which has allowed us to focus on innovation layers on top of it, which is what a lot of application software companies do, is that they don't recreate the underlying technologies. And so we've been able to, bring that same kind of innovation to the AI space as well.
So Andy, given the fact that you've actually worked with large enterprises from your current role as the founder of Alorica, how did you guys decide to build Crescendo AI in its current instantiation? And do you think that you would actually go to market by licensing the core architecture and engine to large enterprises for them to build their own contact centers, or would they have to come to Crescendo? Are you kind of the aggregator of the contact center experience for any number of enterprises, or would you do a white box kind of an offering to enterprises?
It's great questions. I mean, so we've spent a lot of time on that question, right? Because when you think about why CX has not made quantum leaps in terms of improvement, and you look at the quantum of different technologies that have been tried, that people have tried to introduce into the marketplace, the one thing that the commonality that we see across the board, whether large enterprise or small enterprise, is this concept of complexity, right? And if a business wants to enact a new strategy in CX and bring in technology, they ultimately have to behave like a conductor, so to speak, and have the ability to select the right technologies, integrate them, and then find the right labor providers and pools, and then orchestrate all this to ultimately deliver a seamless experience to their customers. Historically, I mean, while it sounds simple, this is where we've seen companies like not able to execute crisply. And so when we thought about how we were going to go to market, our number one intent was to make buying CX AI services extremely easy, right? And what does that really mean, right? So if you start with this concept that Crescendo's underlying goal is to help companies leverage and enable AI to serve their customers in a more effective and efficient manner, to sell them a tool and ask them to go do it, that would require that they would have to have talent, expertise, and bandwidth to not only select, implement, deliver, and then on-go manage, right? Because all these models need to be continuously managed to stay relevant and accurate. And so we thought, like, how do we create a product/service offering that eliminates the complexity and just delivers an outcome to businesses and their customers? And so to that question, today, if you want to work with Crescendo, the only way that we're selling it today is that you have to buy the entire experience, right? Which is Crescendo shows up, you say, please make it happen. And Crescendo builds all of your AI for both voice and digital channels, creates that first level of experience, but also augments that technology with humans behind, so that if the technology isn't able to resolve, there is a human behind it that can resolve. At the same time, these humans who are resolving at the back end, they're also our knowledge engineers, and they're also responsible to help continually feed our models and continue to improve them over time. And so as a business, as a buyer of this service, you don't need all the technical capabilities in-house. You don't need to have CX practitioners to figure out how to design the most effective and consumer-pleasing experience. You just basically say, Crescendo, make it happen, and we show up and effectuate it. I think that model, I think, will work for a certain segment of customers to begin with, and our goal is to continue to prove this out. I think many larger enterprises may have like different large departments that have different perspectives on how they want to solve for that. But our approach today is to simplify and deliver an outcome. And we want to work with customers who want to experience the benefits of AI quickly and without complexity.
And what sectors or industries are you targeting first? And what are the ones that you don't think is appropriate for Crescendo or AI to actually be able to deliver the best experience for?
Well, today, I think based on where we are, I think where we see the most applicability of Gen AI is on informational opportunities. So doing pre-sales, doing customer service, answering questions that consumers may have about the products or services they bought. We don't see a lot of delineation between different verticals, but we do see delineation on complexity. So obviously, as a newer business that's just started, our focus is going to be on those businesses that we feel like we can deliver that experience faster with less friction.
I get it.
Yeah, I think Shriram, can I, if I can add one, we use this metaphor for the full stack offering that we've been building, which is when smartphones and GPS became mainstream on iPhone and Android. That was sort of what enabled Uber to go build a taxi hailing software, right? And they sort of had a choice to sell that software to other taxi cab operators or build a taxi cab service themselves. And obviously, they would be competing with the folks who had little to no technology with a big technology advantage. So I think the models exist. And of course, we know, which choice Uber made and resulted in a generational business. And so I think that that's sort of what has convinced us to say, we have to take this entire stack to market. That's how, if you look at the cloud penetration in the contact center industry, it's 12 to 15%, right? So if we don't bring a full stack model to market, we'll have sort of this anemic adoption that's happened over the last 10 years for the next 10 years as well. And the way we sort of spur adoption from, 12 to 15% to like 30, 40, 50%, because if this is not fully digitized and not fully on the cloud, there'll be no chance for AI to be adopted, right? So this is the best delivery model.
Well, what you're really saying is that the traditional BPO model, as you said, the labor intensive, low margin, highly scale inefficient sort of model moves to a software model with AI, very low CapEx, very low OpEx, and you're really driving the value out of all the AI implementation. And so the margin structures and steady stream, I assume you probably are in the 50 plus level margins profile.
Yeah, and constantly increasing, right? So, again, these models are actually quite familiar to us, right? So if you are, call it an Amazon Prime subscriber, right? You know that there is some sort of an interplay between robots and software and warehouses and people and trucks, but you honestly don't care how the medley of all of that comes together, right? All you care is that the network is more throughput and that your outcome gets delivered better and better, right? If they're able to do it at a better margin profile, that's a little bit transparent to the consumer who's like still paying the subscription fee. And so these models have existed in the consumer space, for example, but it required someone to thoughtfully invest in the entire solution, the full stack solution, to bring two people before having a single subscriber, right? So we've built 6 products on the back end that we bring together that are all pre-integrated so that the customers can go live in a matter of like 2 to 4 weeks.
I got it. Okay. All right. Well, let's just talk about how you guys are scaling, because you've had a bit of news in the market already. You're barely nine months old, and you have you've done a financing at a pretty amazing valuation. No complaints. We're participants in that, and we're very happy about the fact. But tell us how you scaled so quickly, and your capital structure. How did you actually scale the overall business in the last 9 months?
So maybe you can talk a little about the capital structure, and I'll talk a little bit about the some of the M&A work we're doing and why.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just start
Yeah.
off with the M&A side. Look, one of the things that is always challenging for a startup is to get market penetration and get new customers. And one of the things that we thought about early on is like, how do we accelerate adoption and confidence, and have proof points in the marketplace that of what our product service can deliver. And so our strategy was like, let's go find a company that is serving the customers that we're interested in serving, and use that as a sandbox, so to speak, to prove out our model and our services. So that's kind of the rationale on the why, right? Because I think the market will move fast and the technology is available. And so therefore, like, how do we get this into as many people's hands as quickly as possible, right? That was really the impetus on the why of A.
And you're specifically referring to your acquisition of Partner Hero?
Partner Hero.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. So, obviously we have our own internal sales teams and go-to-market teams that are focused on new customer acquisitions, but we felt that this strategy would help accelerate. By buying Partner Hero, we felt like we could accelerate the adoption of AI and create proof points much quicker.
Okay, for the benefit of our listeners, Crescendo, a small startup, barely gotten out the gate, buys Partner Hero, a much larger firm with larger profile employees and all of that. It's kind of like the snake eating the goat. Do you guys worry about indigestion, or how do you think about that?
So I think, we essentially, if you think about it, Partner Hero is probably like an $85 million business, a year business, 3,000 plus employees. That it does, on the face of it, seem daunting to do something of that size and scale. But, over my history, I've bought many companies in this space. Lorca today manages 100,000 employees. So for us, it doesn't feel as daunting. It's much more manageable, having gone through it many times, understanding the intricacies of trying to meld cultures together, understanding that, like, that whole motion of aligning organizations behind one mission, understanding how important it is to get the entire organization to understand the vision of the company. Those are things that our team at Crescendo has been really focused on in the first 30 days, because we know that if we get that right, we'll move a lot faster down the line.
Yeah.
And I think, Shriram, on the capital side, we had underwritten each milestone with a structure. Earlier in the conversation, we talk about thinking a priori about the capital architecture. So we talked about, like, we'll underwrite the initial risk to the product, assemble the team. Then we wanted to deploy in like a dozen customer sites and get them all up and running and prove the margin profile expansion work that we were doing. But once we had done those 2 or 3 milestones, we wanted to underwrite the buy and transform as well with Partner Hero.
Yeah. So really what you're saying is that not only AI is a disruptive technology in the BPO industry, you also had a very disruptive approach to the capital structure and the financing of this. I'm curious, the Partner Hero founding team, how did you convince them? Because they had 3,000 employees, and if you are widely successful in your strategy, you probably need 300 employees in Partner Hero. So how were you able to convince the guys to integrate with you, knowing full well that they're going to be skinny down pretty dramatically because of the technology that they're going to start embracing with you?
There's a couple of things in there. One, I think Partner Hero, obviously, like every other BPO company, was concerned about how the industry was going to change and how it would affect them. So I think they had a strong belief. Irvin, the founder of Partner Hero, was very aligned with our vision of where the industry was going to go. And so he really had two choices, right? He could lean in and try to do it himself, lean in and find a partner, or just let things happen to them, right? And I think when you think about the things that are necessary to transform an industry, it is very, very hard to do it alone, right? When I started Alorica, I started with $10,000, never raised any outside capital, so really was doing it alone. And when I sat down and said, okay, why did I fail to transform the industry? What were the things that I lacked? And I came to the conclusion that to change an industry, you need the power of many. The power of many is the concept of bringing people from many different walks of life who all have ability to influence how people think, what they believe, and ultimately how they act. And what we're really talking about is changing people's mindset on what customer experience is, how it should be bought, and how it should be measured, and how it should be evaluated, right? And so when you think about that, you need a much more flexible capital strategy because it's going to take time, right? But you need lots of people in the ecosystem, in your ecosystem, to be able to influence every aspect, whether it's on the finance side, on the consumer side, on the industry analyst side. I mean, everybody needs to kind of be educated and come along for the ride, so to speak. And I don't think that doing it alone is necessarily that's a low percentage shot. Like I can only think of a few people who've done that, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Benioff, right? Those are people who have created new industry sectors, right? But those quantum of people who can do it on their own is very, 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 very small.
Can I tell you what is amazing about what you guys are doing? And this is going to lead me to my next question, which I think you may choose not to answer. In the case of the example that you gave about Elon starting, EV or Tesla, whatever, he did not have a old, car company that he was disrupting. And here in your case, specifically, Andy, you have Alorica, 100,000 employee, traditional BPO, low tech, low margin. You didn't take any money. Kudos to you for having scaled it to a $2 billion revenue business. And now you're starting another company with Anand and building something that can fundamentally disrupt your existing business. So the obvious question I want to ask you is Alorica the next acquisition that you guys will make?
I think there's lots to be learned from both sides, right? I think what Alorica does today is unique and special in that it serves its customers the way that they want to be served today. What Crescendo is working on is to show customers another way, right? And do I think at one day those roads may intersect? I think it's very possible, right? But I think the key is to enable each organization to continue to be successful, right? Do I think that the entire CX industry will transform in 6 months? No, it's not possible. Like, I think when humans tend to extrapolate outcomes much faster than they actually happen in real time. And so companies like Alorica will need to continue to exist because their customers need them to continue to do what they are doing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
So that's, I think,
yeah,
will
that's
roads
a
intersect?
great answer.
Very possible.
Great answer. I didn't expect you to tell me that that's the next acquisition you're going to do next Tuesday. But Anand, I think to the point that Andy makes, notwithstanding the pace of innovation happening in AI, is it fair to say, I can see why human in the loop is going to be critical for automotive industry, for self-driving cars or robot taxis. In the case of customer experience, even if you didn't have a human in the loop, you can deliver a certain basic level of customer service and quality and all of that. Do you see a need for human in the loop for the long term? And if so, what kind of ratios, and scaling?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're trying to go after, I think we started to talk about a 500 to 750 billion TAM. As we start to serve that large of a market, you're going to have an assortment of capabilities that you deliver, right? Like it'll be tuned for vertical, for each scenario, for geographies. There'll be areas where there'll be a little bit of nationalism where data is stored and where humans are based and so on, as AI becomes the default way to provide these services. So as we're building a generational company, we have to think about sort of providing that entire outcome to the customer. And when we think of like what kind of business we're building, there have been like a few multi-hundred million software companies. Because we're going after labor, this can actually be a generational business. Like think Constellation Software, Danaher Energy kind of businesses, which also use some of the same industry transformation theories that we're inspired by. We're also inspired by some of the multidisciplinary team builds like the Livongos of the world that, Hemant, who joined our board, co-founded back in the day.
From Gel Catalyst, you mean?
From General Catalyst. And what we're trying to do is bring that creation ethos where, we're not sort of predetermining the outcome, but in the reality that we live in, back to your question earlier, it's got to be that harmonious combination, right? Exactly what that combination is might change based on what use case and what vertical and what point in time. But that's what builds a generational business, right? If you only have technology, then you're trying to solve every problem as if it's a technology only.
Just one add on to that point, because I think people tend to overestimate the impact to labor. Like you think about all these consumer-based, direct-to-consumer app businesses, whether it could be an Uber or DoorDash, all these apps were built with the mindset that there would be no humans in the loop. The funny thing is, behind each one of these apps that are supposed to have these digitally seamless transactions, there are hundreds of thousands of people behind, like bridging the holes that exist. And there's technology is never perfect, and humans will always need to kind of help to stitch together
which I completely believe in and buy into. Look, gentlemen, I have one last question before we wrap this thing up. It's been a great conversation. The question I have is just put your forecast hat on, and what do you think this looks like for the industry at large? The industry, we said it's hundreds of billions of dollars in overall TAM. In the traditional BPO, what do you think Crescendo will represent, let's say in 2 or 3 years? What is your vision on how big Crescendo is likely to be?
Do you want to answer that question? You go ahead.
Yeah, I will say we see the outcome-based billing model as really a new way of building businesses. For the last 25 years, that's all that enterprises wanted. And for 25 years, everything has been an approximation of delivering an outcome. And we sort of compare that with the transition from on-prem software to SaaS. At that point in time, there were like tactical technology differentiators that SaaS had over on-prem systems. But over a period of time, everybody that was doing SaaS had sort of a baseline set of capabilities. But the early movers to SaaS had a big advantage and they were able to get into new categories and so on. And we think sort of outcome-based deliveries is going to be just a model in the future. And we feel like we've just developed an early mover advantage in this space that we intend to take advantage of.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot. Sounds like you're building not just a transformative business, you're using a transformative technology to really disrupt a known industry for the last 20, 25 years. Thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. Good luck to you both. And hopefully when you guys are making your next big billion-dollar acquisition, you'll come back to this podcast and tell me how you did. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sriram. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sriram.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tech Surge podcast from Celesta Capital. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it, subscribe, or leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back every 2 weeks with more insights and discussions of all things deep tech. Bye for now.